Of nearly 4,000 B-29 superfortresses built during World War II, fewer than 40 survive. Among them, the Enola Gay, the bomber that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. You'd think the most controversial aircraft in history would be the most protected. Instead, it sat outdoors for years, corroding, stripped of parts, nearly lost forever. The answer to why it still exists begins not with history, but with engineering. The B-29 Superfortress arrived at the height of World War II as a machine unlike anything that had come before it. Its pressurized crew compartment allowed 11 men to operate at altitudes above 30,000 feet, where the thin air defeated most enemy fighters and flak. The aircraft's defensive system relied not on gunners crouched behind glass, but on remote-controlled turrets, each linked to analog computers that tracked and aimed at threats faster than any human hand. Four Wright R-3350 engines gave the B-29 a combat radius of about 2,500 miles, enough to strike deep into enemy territory and return, a feat unmatched by earlier bombers. Landing gear followed a tricycle design, which gave pilots greater control on takeoff and landing, especially on the long, crowded runways of Pacific Island airfields. Behind every B-29 stood a vast industrial effort. 3,970 were built across 5 factories in Seattle, Renton, Wichita, Atlanta, and Omaha. The scale was enormous, but the aircraft's complexity was even greater. Each superfortress contained nearly 150,000 parts and miles of wiring, assembled by tens of thousands of workers. Yet today, fewer than 40 complete B-29s survive. Most were dismantled for scrap, their aluminum melted down, and their innovations forgotten. The few that remain, including the Enola Gay, are witnesses to a moment when engineering ambition and wartime urgency produced a bomber that pushed the limits of what was possible. Operation Centerboard, I demanded more than a standard bombing run. At North Field on Tinian Island, Colonel Paul W. Tibbets Jr. led a mission unlike any the Army Air Forces had planned before. The 509th Composite Group, created solely for atomic delivery, was assigned the task. Their aircraft, Enola Gay, stood out as the first B-29 to undergo the silver plate conversion. Engineers stripped away all but the tail gun, removing armor and defensive turrets to shed thousands of pounds. The bomb bay was completely redesigned, bulkheads eliminated, a special shackle and reinforced doors installed to cradle the 10-foot little boy bomb. Pneumatic actuators replaced traditional hydraulics, allowing bomb bay doors to snap open in an instant. A dedicated wiring harness and weaponeers panel gave the crew precise control over arming and release, an unprecedented step for a bomber. These changes turned the Enola Gay into a single-purpose machine, engineered for a mission that would alter the course of history. At 2:45 a.m. on August 6, 1945, Enola Gay lifted off from North Field, Tinian, with Colonel Paul W. Tibbets at the controls and the uranium-fueled little boy bomb secured in its modified bay. The crew of 12 followed a flight plan that kept them at high altitude, navigating across the Pacific and over the Japanese mainland. As Hiroshima appeared below, Bombardier Thomas Farabee released Little Boy at precisely 8:15 a.m. local time. The bomb detonated almost 2,000 feet above the city, unleashing a force that destroyed much of Hiroshima in a single instant. The mission was completed in just over 12 hours, with Enola Gay returning to Tinian unscathed. The immediate military outcome was undeniable. A single aircraft and a single bomb had changed the nature of warfare. In that moment, Enola Gay became more than an airframe. It became a witness to the dawn of the atomic age, forever set apart from the thousands of bombers that came before it. After the Hiroshima mission, Enola Gay's fate was far from assured. The aircraft returned to the United States, touching down at Roswell Army Airfield as the 509th Composite Group transitioned to peacetime duties. No longer needed for combat, the bomber was cycled through a series of postings, each one a potential off-ramp to the scrap heap. In April 1946, Enola Gay was dispatched to Kwajalein for Operation Crossroads, supporting nuclear tests before being ferried back to the mainland. By July, it arrived at Davis-Monthan Army Airfield, joining thousands of surplus planes lined up in the Arizona desert. The scale of post-war disposal was staggering. More than 61,000 aircraft were scrapped in the United States between 1945 and 1947, driven by budget cuts, the rising value of aluminum, and the rapid shift to jet-powered bombers. Most B-29s vanished into this machinery of obsolescence. Only the intervention of senior officers and early advocates who recognized Enola Gay's singular role in history kept it moving, first to Andrews Air Force Base, then to Park Ridge, Illinois. At every stop, its survival depended on paperwork, persistence, and the conviction that some machines, no matter how controversial, could not be replaced. Years exposed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base turned the Enola Gay from a technological marvel into a relic at risk. Parked among thousands of surplus bombers, the aircraft faced relentless sun, wind, and rain. The aluminum skin began to pit and flake. Salt carried on desert winds ate into the airframe, while missing rivets and open seams let moisture seep inside. Propellers vanished, scavenged for use on other planes. The tail section, once home to the last defensive gun, lost its equipment and wiring, stripped away for parts, or stolen outright. Condition reports from the late 1970s documented deepening structural fatigue in the wings and fuselage, with corrosion spreading unchecked. By the early 1980s, the Enola Gay was described as a rusted skeleton, its future hanging by a thread. The threat of total loss was real, compounded by the political unease of caring for such a charged artifact. Survival no longer meant safety. Preservation had become a race against time and decay. By the early 1980s, the Enola Gay was in dire condition, corroded, stripped of parts, and barely recognizable as the aircraft that had once altered the course of history. The Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum made a decisive choice to rescue the bomber not as a relic to fly again, but as a preserved artifact for future generations. The restoration project, announced in 1982, would become the largest of its kind ever attempted by an aviation museum. Over 300,000 work hours and a budget of roughly $2.5 million were committed to the effort, drawing on the expertise of conservators, engineers, and Air Force specialists. More than 1,200 original components were tracked down and recovered from across the country. Wing ribs from a Texas depot, a tail turret assembly from Ohio, and specialized pneumatic actuators from a decommissioned B-29 in New England. Each part was painstakingly cleaned, repaired, and heat-treated to match the original metallurgy. When the team began disassembly, they uncovered weld marks and original tubing hidden deep within the structure. These discoveries confirmed the unique silver plate modifications that had enabled the Hiroshima mission, including the F-1 pneumatic bomb release system and reinforced bomb bay floor. The restoration's goal was never to return the Enola Gay to flight. Instead, every decision centered on preserving its precise 1945 configuration, ensuring that the aircraft's history, both technical and symbolic, would endure long after its last mission. In 1995, the Enola Gay became the center of a fierce public dispute at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. The planned exhibition, timed for the 50th anniversary of the Hiroshima mission, set off a storm of protest even before the aircraft was fully installed. Veterans organizations, including the American Legion and the Air Force Association, objected to the original exhibit script, arguing that its focus on the human toll in Hiroshima overshadowed the context of ending the war. Letters poured in, and congressional hearings soon followed, with lawmakers demanding changes to what they saw as a revisionist narrative. Historians and curators pushed back against political pressure, warning that scholarly interpretation was being compromised. Meanwhile, survivor groups and Japanese advocacy organizations called for a more honest acknowledgement of the suffering caused by the bombing, insisting that the exhibit's language did not go far enough. Under intense scrutiny, the Smithsonian revised the exhibit text to a more neutral description, but the controversy left scars. 2 curators resigned, and the museum's leadership faced accusations from all sides. The Enola Gay was no longer just a preserved artifact. It had become a flashpoint in the ongoing debate over how America remembers its most consequential weapons and the cost of their use. Since 2003, the Enola Gay has stood at the heart of the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center, presented in the same configuration it carried on the morning of August 6, 1945. Visitors encounter the original nose art, the distinctive Dimples 82 tail code, and the cockpit restored to its wartime layout. Engines, bomb bay doors, and the reinforced bay floor, each a testament to the silver plate modifications, remain on view. Around 250,000 people pass through the gallery each year, drawn by the aircraft's presence and the questions it raises. In 2022, a digital interactive kiosk was added, inviting guests to explore technical diagrams and mission data in detail. The Smithsonian continues to act as steward, but it is the public's engagement through study, debate, and remembrance that now sustains the Enola Gay's legacy. Returning the Enola Gay to flight has never been an option. Structural aging and decades of exposure have left the airframe with deep-seated fatigue, especially in the wings. Engineering analyses from the Smithsonian's restoration team showed that making the bomber airworthy again would require replacing more than half of its original structure, a process that would erase much of what makes it historically authentic. Museum policy now treats the aircraft as an artifact, not a machine to be flown. This stands in sharp contrast to other World War II warbirds that still take to the skies at air shows. For the Enola Gay, preservation means remaining grounded, protected from further wear, and kept as close as possible to its 1945 state. Today, the Enola Gay remains more than an artifact. It is a mirror reflecting how societies wrestle with technological achievement and moral consequence. Its presence demands that we confront, not avoid, the difficult intersections of history and memory. What we choose to remember shapes who we become.